Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining our annual mid-year impact call. On behalf of the team here and the families that we serve, we're so honored to be spending time with you today and excited to share all the ways in which you are helping to shrink time between disaster and recovery for survivors of natural disasters. My name is Alexis Williams, and I'm the Chief Development Officer here at SBP. I'll also be serving as your MC today and monitoring the chat for questions and comments. And speaking of, next slide, please. Throughout the presentation today, please place any comments or questions into the chat box. I will keep an eye on this chat and make sure to lift up your questions during our Q&A session at the end. We'll also be dropping links into the chat throughout the program so that you can learn more, and those links will be shared out after the call. So please do use that chat space. Before introducing today's speakers, I'd like to thank you again for spending your time with us today. You all come here with different reasons for being here and many different causes that are important to you. Our work here at SBP started with rebuilding homes and now intersects with a wide array of important issues that affect us all. Out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, our work covers 8 of them, and our programs average between 2 and 4 of these goals per program. Whether it be economic and racial equity in the systems that have the power to enable access to safety, stability, and resource, or climate and sustainability measures that rely on collaborative action to ensure that we respect the resources that we have while also creating innovative pathways to future generations. One thing is for certain: the number of people and communities across this nation who need our help is growing. And my colleagues on the call today will share more about the impact that we're making and hope to inspire greater partnership with you all as we continue to scale. Next slide, please. Presenting today, we have Zach Rosenberg, who is our co-founder and CEO, Liz McCartney, who is our co-founder and COO, myself, obviously, Thomas Corley, who is our Chief Recovery Officer, and Reese May, who is our Chief of Strategy and Innovation Officer. And now I'm excited to hand it over to our wonderful CEO, Zach. Would you like to go ahead and get us started for today?
Indeed, I would. Thank you, Alexis, and hello, friends. Thank you for making the investment to be with us today. Looking forward to any questions or feedback you have. When Liz and I first came to New Orleans almost 18 years ago, 6 months after Katrina, we were astounded to see the level of human suffering in a country as otherwise successful as America. This was 6 months after the storm. And it disrupted the assumptions we had about how things work. Seeing people who'd achieved an element of American success owning their homes, seeing them living in such tenuous circumstances, veterans, teachers, grandmothers, people who reminded us of our own families, living in attics and cars and garages with the Lucky and FEMA trailers, it blew our minds. And so after 2 weeks, we could not just tell these people, good luck, hope it works out for you. We're going to go home now. So we knew we had to do something else. And we committed to staying for 2 more weeks and find out who was building the houses, because that's what people wanted. And we were going to help them by raising funds back in DC. So we went to the big groups and we asked, when are you going to start the building? We'll help. And we got pretty cavalier response. Focused on process rather than outcomes. And the response was, we've been doing disaster recovery the same way for 30 years. Building's the 3rd phase. Recovery has to occur in order. You can't get to rebuilding until you follow the first 2 phases. And we knew that's not what we'd want for our own loved ones. And we couldn't abide that being forced on other people's loved ones. So we moved to New Orleans. And with a great team, and with tools from Habitat for Humanity, in the first 14 months, we were able to completely rebuild 88 houses, and that was a win. We got some great attention. Eventually, we were fortunate enough to partner with Toyota to learn and then start practicing the Toyota production system. And over time, we were able to reduce construction time by 48%, significantly reduce cost, and then take this successful rebuilding model and start to apply it elsewhere. With the support of Farmers Insurance, we moved into Joplin, Missouri, and soon had a national model for post-disaster recovery that was highly effective. Over time, however, we realized that our model was not truly client-centered. Being reactive had two major flaws that we could no longer abide. First, we could never get to scale. We couldn't get to everyone. And second, rebuilding only after disaster meant that people would suffer before they got to us. So we evolved the mission, and that extends beyond, but certainly includes our rebuilding work. And we're now, we believe, fully client-centered. SBP recognizes that after disaster, people are at risk of being pushed beyond their breaking point. We understand this, and that's what drives us to fully embrace our mission of reducing the time between disaster and recovery. So that's where we meet today. The mission remains, however, we're leaning into it as this moment requires. You'll see today that we're using our doing and direct service work directly with clients to inform, drive, and indeed require the system change and scaled impact work that our colleagues are going to tell you about. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. We can go to the next slide, please. Quick agenda. We're going to give you an update on the traditional disaster rebuilding work that we do efficiently, again, because of the support and what we learned from Toyota. But we're also going to let you know how we share our learnings, indeed now across the globe, and how we're working to improve the system of disaster recovery so it works much more efficiently and works fairly for everyone. Before we do that, I want to ground us in a human being who's emblematic of why we're doing this work. We begin internal and external calls this way because at our center, our clients' resilience, their experiences are what need to ground us. So we can go to the next slide. Again, please meet Mr. Gene, who is a 77-year-old veteran of the United States Army, a retired postal worker, a lifelong New Orleanian, a man who is proud of his home, but even more proud of the way that he has provided for and cared for his family, including his granddaughter right there. Hurricane Ida tore the roof off the Green family home, caused extensive damage, some of which you can see here. Mr. Green knew that Ida was coming. He thought he was prepared and resilient. He had a plan for his family. And as important, he had a plan for the home. He had insurance. Devastatingly, Mr. Green was one of the thousands of Louisiana homeowners who, despite paying premiums for years, had his insurance company fold, no recourse, and was left with no clear path forward. As we know, predictability is one of, or predictability or lack thereof is one of the predictors of whether someone is or isn't going to be pushed beyond their breaking point. And unfortunately, despite doing the right thing, Mr. Green did not have the predictability that he had paid for and needed. He applied for FEMA, but for no discernible reason, and like far too many other American citizens, he was denied with no explanation. In other words, Mr. Green did the right thing. He followed the process, but he did not have a clear path home. Because of partners like you, Mr. Green is now on the path to not only rebuilding his home, but rebuilding his family's life. He will not be pushed beyond his breaking point. We're honored to repair and rebuild Mr. Green's home, and we're going to make it stronger and more resilient by utilizing the fortified standard. Everyone should look it up for rebuilding. It's a big deal to serve someone who served our country and local community. And as we walk through each disaster response update today, as well as the way we're scaling that work. I hope you'll keep Mr. Green and his family in mind as the people who lie at the heart of our work. So we can go to the next slide, please. Mr. Thomas.
Thanks, Zach. Good morning, folks. I'm really excited to take a bit of time to share some updates on our build and share programs, which are really critical parts of our response and recovery programs here at SBP, our direct service work. For those who may be unfamiliar, both our build and our share programs deliver restored, resilient homes for disaster-affected homeowners. And what's more is that this program is supported by a deep network of committed staff, selfless AmeriCorps members, and thousands of volunteers, which make our work possible. So let me start with our build program. I'm proud to say that we are at 65% of our 2023 goal. We are realizing 321 homes completed so far this year. I also know, just for a second, that we have some SBP team members on the call, as well as volunteers. I really want to acknowledge and appreciate you for your commitment to SBP's cause and our mission, and especially during this super hot summer that we're experiencing along the Gulf. Thank you for showing up and committing yourselves to our mission. On to our share program. This program serves as really a coupling between corporate giving arms and foundations, and connecting those resources with smaller local nonprofits that are doing really critical recovery work, but who may lack kind of the robust fundraising teams to access these resources. And so what SBP does is grant these funds and then coach organizations to scale their recovery programs. And so through our share efforts, we've completed 259 rebuilds so far in 2023, almost halfway to our goal of impacting 600 homes through our partner organizations. What's really great about Share, y'all, is that it gets SBP into states and communities where we don't have brick and mortars today. So states like Tennessee and Kentucky and Pennsylvania and Alabama. With all of this, you can see we're at 580 homes repaired, made resilient here in 2023. And without a doubt, the numbers, they tell us where we're at with our overall performance, and there's a ton for us to be proud of. There's a ton for us to be excited about. But I want to take a moment here and just pivot to some of the ways that our build program in particular is really growing in influence and impact in ways that are really measured beyond just homes rebuilt. So if we can move to the next slide, let me update you on a few things. So we've been really, really busy in 2023. SBP has traveled as far as Guam, where we are lending our experience and expertise in an effort to really accelerate recovery for communities affected by disasters and that are feeling kind of the long tail of disaster recovery. Out in Puerto Rico, we're proud to share that we are bringing our Opportunity Housing program to the island. This program, it partners with the local land bank to take on blighted properties, rehabilitate them, and then offer them to low-income home buyers. Our executive director in Puerto Rico, Edgardo, he's really led the introduction of this program with extreme passion and loyalty to his community. We're so excited here at SBP to be able to bring this program to the island and introduce affordable homeownership opportunities. And then here in our home state, our founding state of Louisiana, SBP has served 574 households that were affected by Hurricane Ida. And that's more than any other NGO in this space. And so, you know, this and more, we're doing a lot. And through it, we're meeting a ton of disaster affected individuals and families. Now, just a moment ago, you heard Zach share the story of Mr. Gene. And I want to bring forward just one other SBP family that, for a lot of us here at SBP, it reminds us of why it's so important that we challenge the disaster recovery systems that exist today that ultimately position individuals and communities to suffer. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll introduce you to the Colen family. We met the Colen family back in March, so just 3 or 4 months ago here out in Houston, Texas. And I'll remind folks that Hurricane Harvey, it affected Texas, the Houston area almost 6 years ago. Mildred, who is 88 years old, has owned her home in Houston for close to 2 decades. Mildred lives in her house with her daughter, Iris, who is 63 years old, and her granddaughter, Aliyah, who is 29. So the Colen family, they were affected by Harvey. They received about a foot of water in their house. Their roof was damaged. They received a FEMA award. It was too little, but they hired a contractor and then immediately experienced fraud. They provided a payment up front and then never saw that contractor again. So out of the gate, they're without the resources they need to navigate recovery. The next thing they did is they applied for the federally funded disaster recovery program that was running in Houston. They were denied. The reason was unclear to them. So they took the next step and worked with free legal aid in Houston to appeal that decision and got zero response. So there they are 5.5, almost 6 years later, and they connect with SBP through 311. And now SBP, we're excited that we're going to be able to leverage volunteers to finish the job, bring the family back together. We're doing a lot to keep the Colen family from being forced into a situation like this again in the name of introducing resilience and sustainability measures to the home. So thanks to our partners with Travelers Insurance, we are layering in a fortified roof. You heard Zach say it. I've got it tattooed on my lower back. It's one of the most exciting things that we're doing at SBP. And Travelers really coached us on the importance of introducing this resilient roof measure to homes. So we're providing that. We're also providing resilient floors and PVC cabinets. So if, God forbid, there is a flood again, material can be brought out of the house, cleaned, and put back in, which is going to reduce the cost that it would take the Colen family to rebuild again, if, God forbid, it were to happen. But here's the reality, y'all. There's really nothing that SBP can do to the Colen family home that will affect the systems that ultimately deserted the Colen family and put them in this position. And really, SBP doesn't want to be meeting families like the Colens 6 years later, but we have been for the last 17 years since Zach and Liz first came to Louisiana. We're meeting families that have echoes of what the Colen family is going through today. And we're going to continue to meet families like this if we don't fundamentally affect the way that our country runs disaster recovery programs. And so now if we can move to kind of my final slide here, I want to just give an update on our newest recovery program, which we're operating in Florida. So this follows Hurricane Ian, and Hurricane Ian, it was a Category 4 hurricane that hit Florida last September. The geographic spread of this storm has really called SBP to run services statewide. So we're in Southwest and Northeast Florida. We've done a lot of things since we got on the ground in our initial response work. Excitingly, we've partnered with the Florida Department of Commerce and the governor's team on a sheltering in place program. So this positions SBP to make basic critical repairs to ensure that homes are livable while residents continue to navigate the next steps of the recovery journey. We're one of only 6 NGOs that are participating in the program. And I'm really proud that our team on the ground, they're led by Pamela Kidwell, our executive director. We've done 60% of all the projects that have been completed through this program across the state, leveraging $2 million in just the last 6 months with our partners at Volunteer Florida. We have over 300 households that are in our approved pipeline today, and we're adding 15 to 20 new households every week that are seeking those temporary repair services. With some partners, SBP also advocated that this program and this fund that has $25 million assigned to it require fortified roofs be assigned to all homes built through the program. Finally, our disaster assistance program, which supports homeowners through the FEMA process. You're going to hear a little bit more about this from Liz later on. This program has helped over 80 survivors receive nearly $650,000 in additional recovery support from FEMA by helping them file appeal after their initial insufficient awards. And so we're doing all of this. And frankly, it's trying to solve what SBP and what we have been told is unsolvable. As far back as Joplin, which is almost 11 years ago, 2,000 homes ago, SBP has been told that the best thing we can do for disaster survivors is tell them to be patient and to help those survivors be resilient against the long timeline of recovery. Liz McCartney, who you'll hear from in just a moment here, was actually at that meeting where government officials said, the best thing you can do is get people to just wait and be patient. And there's some folklore in SBP about Liz leaping across the table in righteous frustration, but I'm pretty sure her response was way more measured. Regardless, ever since that moment, Through our build work, all of our direct service work that we're doing with SHARE and with disaster assistance program, we're pushing against this perspective that we have to just accept things the way that they are. And we're learning through all of our response and recovery work firsthand the effects of delay and inefficiencies within our disaster recovery system. And we're learning who it hurts and how it hurts them and what we've got to do to stop it. And so to expand just a little bit further on how what we're learning through build and SHARE and disaster assistance program and all of our direct service work is ultimately informing our system change work, let me step back here and ask Zach to continue leading us through these updates. Zach?
Thomas, thank you. I just want to give you a massive round of applause. That was beautiful. So Thomas, thank you. The direct service work that Thomas described is what informs and indeed requires our system change work. Our client-facing frontline teams hear the stories and bear witness and deeply understand the human impact of the broken systems that cause survivors to experience months and years and unpredictability in their recovery. This is what informs, or this unpredictability, the preventable suffering, and the knowledge of it combined with our values, what Liz experienced that day in Joplin, and so many of our colleagues have, our culture and ethos of constructive discontent are what inform and drive the 5 areas of work that you're going to see on the next slide. So we can go to the next slide. SBP's programs, and I'm really proud of this, touch every phase of the disaster cycle. We anticipate, we rebuild homes, we drive policy change, and after and during recovery, we're driving sustainable and resilient community development. We are bringing national experience and data points to local communities so that they have the tools they need to build resilience before disaster, recover quickly, and recover predictably in a resilient manner when one occurs. As you can see from the map on the right, we are reaching many areas of our country, and we're doing a variety of things. It used to be in the past that SBP's growth and expansion was in response to a major disaster. The team would deploy and would set up a rebuilding shop there to rebuild homes. And while we still do that essential work, our growth is no longer limited to being reactive, and that's because of your support. It's our proactive, anticipatory approach that reduces the need to rebuild in the first place. By preparing households, sharing best practices, building capacity in local leaders, and driving national policy change, we are one day going to eliminate the need for post-disaster nonprofit rebuilding. In other words, if we, and by we, I mean all of us on this call, and those if we prioritize solving the commonly occurring problems upstream, taking a business-minded approach, we can transform the disaster recovery landscape for good and prevent unnecessary suffering in the first place. I am deeply proud of the fact that all 5 of SBP's interventions prioritize most vulnerable families, and in turn levels the playing field in disaster resilience and recovery. I want to thank Farmers Insurance for its annual investment in helping to build more equitable resilience and recovery across the country. In the next segment, we're going to highlight 3 ways we're taking on-the-ground learning and using them to solve upstream problems. I'm going to pass it very soon to the program leaders, Liz and Reese, and ask them, Liz and Reese, to unpack these programs in more detail. But what I want to share is that these programs are not only building financial and community resilience, racial equity, and ensuring an equitable distribution of financial resources, they're also operating at scale, real scale, that affects tens of thousands of disaster survivors each year. Our strategic plan calls for these programs to scale nationally, significantly in 5 years, and with your support, we're going to be able to reach hundreds of thousands of survivors after disaster and even more before disasters, so they don't need help in the first place. Liz, I am so excited to hear folks, for you to share with folks the transformational work of our disaster assistance program. So I'm going to hand it over to you to walk us through that. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Zach, and welcome everybody. We really appreciate you joining the call. So since 2020, the Disaster Assistance Program, or DAP, has helped 535 survivors access an additional $2.5 million in funding from FEMA. So on average, our clients receive $7,662 in additional funding as a result of us filing appeals on their behalf. That's an increase of 62%. So DAP has become a core recovery activity at SBP, and it allows us to assist at greater scale and also complements our other response activities, which many of you are familiar with and include everything from recovery training to mucking, gutting, mold suppression, and repairing homes. DAP also has a really favorable return on investment. For every dollar that's invested in the program, we're able to get our clients $3 in additional funding from FEMA. So this is really important because many of the clients that we support are marginalized and really struggle to navigate the overly complex and bureaucratic process of applying to and appealing FEMA awards. However, I'm sorry, hold on for one sec. Sorry about that, folks. However, they need the funds probably more than anyone because they often lack insurance and really don't have any other financial resources that are available to them after a disaster. So this FEMA funding is really critical. So maybe you're thinking, so how does this program tie into systems change work and sort of the big picture of disrupting the current systems and programs that exist? Well, let me take a moment. I'm going to connect the dots for you. First, the amount of funding that households receive through FEMA dictates how much federal funding a community will receive. So if more residents apply to FEMA and receive higher awards, then the community will in turn receive more federal funding. So interestingly, by applying to FEMA and appealing FEMA awards, residents aren't just helping themselves, they're actually helping their whole community. The second thing is that by applying to and appealing FEMA award, residents have more funding to cover the cost of repairs on their own. So it allows organizations like SBP to really further leverage or stretch philanthropic funding that we do receive. And then the third and final way that this program, this DAP program, contributes to system change is by allowing us to see important trends in award data. And so I want to draw your attention to the chart on the screen that's on the right. This chart tracks the total amount of appeal awards that SBP has been able to secure for our clients after several recent disasters. And the two columns that are on the right-hand side are labeled Fiona and Ian. As many of you know, Hurricane Fiona impacted Puerto Rico, and then within 2 weeks, Hurricane Ian impacted the state of Florida. What you don't see here, but that's really important to note, is that we submitted the same number of appeals for clients after Fiona as we have for clients after Ian, and yet clients in Florida received 10 times as much appeals funding as clients in Puerto Rico have. So it's a really significant difference, 10 times. So what do we do with this data, right? So here's what we do. We share it both internally and externally. We share it with our advise and advocate teams who share the data with Congress, FEMA leaders, elected officials, and governments that they train and support around the United States. And we think it's really important to raise up this data and show the inequities within the FEMA programs, which positions SBP and our partners to really work on changing the system and figure out how to make these programs that really exist to help the clientele that we're helping file appeals access additional funding and support. And so DAP is one of several new programs, as Zach mentioned, that's allowing us to scale and help more individuals and also help communities while disrupting and hopefully eventually changing the current systems that are in place. So I'm going to hand it off to Reese May, who's our Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, and he's going to talk about the Recovery Fellows Program, which is helping local and state governments access more funding for really critical recovery and mitigation programs. So next slide, please.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks to everyone again for spending a little time with us. After what you've heard from Thomas and Liz and Zach, it should come really as no surprise that at SBP we take seriously the role that government plays in the lives of vulnerable communities before, during, and after disasters. We know that federal, state, and local governments play an enormous role in determining how well communities and individuals prepare and recover from disasters. Despite massive federal investments recently, like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, small to medium-sized communities often struggle to access resources, implement projects, and drive real outcomes for the most vulnerable communities and survivors. This is really where SBP's Resilience and Recovery Fellows program comes in. We're working to even the playing field and lending our expertise and capacity to local governments, helping them with planning efforts, including comprehensive, resilient recovery programs that will strengthen their communities before the next big disaster. But we're also helping to lift up the voices and needs of community members who aren't heard enough, or in some cases at all. And we're helping communities understand the right kind of funding and help their community access various streams. For example, all fellows will have the goal to access or influence at least $5 million in funding for their community in the first 24 months on the job. So far, our fellows have been placed in Terrebonne Parish and Lake Charles, Louisiana, as well as Hazard, Kentucky. By the end of the year, we estimate they'll have helped communities access or influenced a cumulative $88 million in resilience funding. I'll make sure I say that correctly, $88 million in resilience funding for small to medium-sized communities in the most affected parts of Louisiana, recent floods in Kentucky. So you can see here a few examples of the impact that our fellows are making on the slide here, including funding for resilient home rebuilds and funding for disaster survivors who would even access their homes through bridge repairs in Kentucky and affected parts of the country there. I want to thank the Walmart Foundation for helping SBP launch the Fellows Program. This is part of its Gulf Resilience and Equity initiatives and for their steadfast commitment in these communities over the last 12 months. For the funding partners out there who joined the call, if building community resilience in an area or some areas is a priority for you, I'd ask that you consider investment in the Fellows Program. The return to communities is incredible, as I mentioned earlier, and we're helping to build equity by ensuring that small to medium-sized communities also benefit from significant recent federal investments. So here we've discussed so far an example of how SBP is affecting the system as it's faced by individuals with Liz and Claire and the important work of the DAP program. Here, I've also shared an example of how we're affecting it from a community and regional standpoint by providing these fellows to help communities access resources. We know they'll do better. I do want to talk about one last example about how SBP can help reduce the time between disaster and recovery nationally through our Recovery Acceleration Fund, or as we affectionately refer to it, RAF. Could we put the next slide up, please? So just quickly, let me talk about what the Recovery Acceleration Fund is. It's a social impact investment fund that blends philanthropic dollars and investment capital in order to rebuild for the most vulnerable HUD-qualified homeowners years before state programs have historically been able to serve these kinds of folks. The innovation is important and the need for it is urgent because without it, survivors are forced to take the only other option, and that's wait years until a state program receives HUD funding and begins to capitalize a state-managed rebuilding program that in the end will only reach a fraction of those who are eligible for assistance. Thanks to years of SBP's advocacy efforts in a handful of states, we expect in just the next few months for several states to include a reimbursement pathway, which is critical in their HUD-approved action plan. And that will allow low-income families, folks working hourly wages with little to no savings, to be able to make upfront repairs to their homes using SBP's RAF loans, and then be reimbursed later. Once Congress has appropriated assistance, HUD has allocated assistance, states have formed plans to use it and can actually make those resources available to survivors. RAF avoids all of that delay and the human toll that goes with it, while also reducing the cost of home repair and rebuilding by making repairs sooner. Let me talk for just a second about how it works. With the Recovery Acceleration Fund, SBP finances immediate home repairs for survivors who will qualify for federal assistance when it arrives, but cannot finance repairs to their homes today. SBP, through our experience and our partnership with state and local governments, we know who HUD will deem eligible for reimbursement. And so we collect that eligibility documentation, organize the loan, oversee the repair work. When the time comes, we help survivors apply for the state reimbursement program, where the reimbursement is then used to extinguish the RAF loan. And in the meantime, families are able to live in their safe, sanitary, affordable homes that they already own far faster than waiting years on the state to finally send a contractor out to make the repairs. This is an exciting public-private partnership that's really already showing signs of success. We're doing it right now in Louisiana, and it's working. You can see on the slide here a picture of our first RAF welcome home party, Miss Elsie out in Kenner. A special shout out to UPS, who was our first major contributor to the Recovery Acceleration Fund. And with our first fund, we're going to preserve around $2 million in home equity through just over a dozen loans. We talk for a second about who we're helping. These are 86% of people who identify as Black. Our average Recovery Acceleration Fund client in Louisiana is 67 years old, and 100% of our clients live on fixed income with an average income of $40,000 or less, often closer to $20,000 annually. So how can we scale it? The success in Louisiana, how do we recognize it elsewhere? Right now, we believe that Florida and Kentucky, a couple of specific counties, and the state of Florida will include reimbursement in their forthcoming HUD action plans. This has taken years of preparation from SBP, but we've built the right relationships and landed the right language that will make RAF possible. Our goal is going to be to serve between 100 and 500 survivors in any state where we launch a RAF. And I'd ask that you all consider what SBP really needs to achieve scale, and that's additional investment. I hope those who are interested in how this innovation can reduce the time between disaster and recovery will reach out to me afterward. We worked so hard to achieve the right conditions for RAF to assist survivors in recently impacted communities. With more support, with your support, it'll be possible for SBP to achieve our bold vision for success later in 2023 and in 2024. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Liz, but thank you all again so much for your investment of time and energy and enthusiasm in SBP. Back to you, Liz.
Thanks, Reese. And Dave, thanks for your question about NVOADs and state VOADs. And for those of you not familiar with this acronym, that stands for the National Volunteers Organizing After Disasters. And then there's also state level volunteers organizing after disasters as well. So we have a couple of colleagues who attend state VOAD calls regularly in communities that have been impacted by disaster. And they run our disaster assistance program and our share program as well. We recently hired a new director of response who will also be participating in those calls, trying to understand how we can best plug in and support and complement other service providers in the area to reduce redundancy and hopefully add capacity to the community through training, sharing best practices, and also providing direct support to survivors on the ground there. So my colleague Angela was at the National NVOAD conference earlier this year, and she said it was really fantastic. So thank you all for hosting that. A great opportunity to meet some folks that over the last few years she spent quite a bit of time on the phone with, and she's really excited to be heading out to California next month to do training of some of the VOADs on the ground there as well in communities that were impacted by floods earlier this year. So, and Dave, maybe we can follow up offline if there are other suggestions that you have for us about working to support some of those state VOADs more closely. So Reese, thank you. And thanks to everybody for helping and supporting SBP and our clients. not just right after disasters, but also in the long term. And really, you make it possible for us to say yes to the hard things. Sometimes we're the last rebuilding group in a community. Often we're the last rebuilding group in a community. And being able to create a loan product for homeowners, especially those who struggle to access financing, and making sure that we're rebuilding more resiliently, it's really, all of it is going to ensure that when communities are impacted again, the impact of those disasters is less and people are better positioned. And so with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Alexis to highlight a supporter who's really going above and beyond right now.
Thanks, Liz. I'm really excited to share with you a story about one of our favorite SBP supporters, Jim Feeney. Love to be able to introduce him to you right now. He is traveling halfway through a 10,000 mile ride across the perimeter of the United States for SBP and the people that we serve. We have a short video for you all so that Jim can tell you in his own words what he's up to. So next slide, please.
The perimeter ride is actually a perimeter bicycle ride around the United States. 32 perimeter states, take about 5 months, and it'll be approximately 10,000 miles in distance. The goal of the ride is to try to bring 10 families home with this trip. My one-day struggles are nothing compared to the struggles of an average family trying to get home. In that respect, I think I have to just push through and realize that my journey is a lot simpler than their journey. You have a unique opportunity to make a difference and to help those people come home again through donations to SBP or by volunteering with SBP around the locations they have around the country. You can make a difference in the lives of these people trying to get home.
So Jim's journey serves as such a great reminder of the incredible impact that just one person can make. As I mentioned, Jim is halfway through his ride right now, and he's already garnered some national media attention. So we'll drop that link in the chat as well and share it after the call. But so that it really lifts Jim's spirits to know that people are following along on his journey and supporting him, whether it's online or by donating. So we hope that you'll visit SBPerimeter.org to show your support, or even help by donating and helping him reach his goal to raise $300,000 to bring these families home. And you can do that by starting your own support page or by donating to somebody else's. And you'll see that he's already halfway through his fundraising goal as well. So thank you so much, Jim, for your help. I'm going to move us to the next slide because we also have a special announcement to make.
SBPerimeter.
And that is that our fabulous board member, Lisa Eisenstein, has very generously offered to match all donations in connection to her support of Jim. She has a page called Lisa is Building a House, and she has generously offered to match up to $100,000. So we're very excited by this generosity, and thank you so much, Lisa, for stepping up and supporting Jim, but also the folks that we serve. We're going to drop the link in the chat as well to Lisa's campaign so that you can take part in that exciting opportunity to double your impact as well. And now taking a cue from Jim's lead as the kind of consummate advocate for all things SBP, I'm going to wrap this up here before we get to the Q&A session by sharing 3 ways that you can stay involved with SBP. So thank you for the next slide. So there's 3 different ways that you can join us in our work. One of them is to volunteer. We have various sites throughout the country, and right now there are opportunities to volunteer in both New Orleans and Puerto Rico. There's no prior experience necessary, and just your willingness to help and learn is all we need. So we have a wonderful, capable team that will keep you safe on the site and teach you what you need to do in order to help bring more families home. Secondly, obviously, we would love for you to financially contribute if that's part of your journey with SBP to help us bring more families home. You can give to SBP directly or support Jim's Ride and choose to have your gift matched by Lisa, our board member. But no matter how much you give, the point is that we're working together to bring people home and create more stability and recovery for folks like Mr. Gene or the Colen family that you heard about earlier in the call. Lastly, and thirdly, we have the opportunity to serve as an AmeriCorps member and a term with SBP. You can do that yourself, or we always love referrals from your networks. Our AmeriCorps members serve on a variety of roles, from construction to community engagement and volunteer coordination. 10 months in SBP's AmeriCorps program is a great opportunity for gap years, starting a new career, or even investing in education. So the links to learn and take action on all of those are in the chat, and those same links, as always, will be shared after the call as well. So without further ado, we'd love to hear from you. We've said a lot today, and that brings us to our question and answer portion. So please do feel free to use the chat portion of the service here, and we'll go ahead and get started with some of the questions. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and click over to the next slide. Thank you. So we do have one question up of how do we decide where and when to respond to large scale disasters. So Thomas, I think I'll go ahead and pass that one over to you, please.
Yeah, great question. So first, as Liz shared, we have hired on a director of disaster response, whose primary role is to monitor all events kind of within the Caribbean, as well as stateside, Puerto Rico, and get SBP connected to the effects on the ground and begin to understand how SBP can respond. Because you heard Zach say early in SBP's evolution, the primary way that SBP would respond is send human beings to offer muck, gut, mold suppression services. Today, we have a library of resources that guides individuals and communities on how to recover. Reese has an arsenal of experienced individuals that can guide local governments on how to accelerate their recovery process. And then our disaster assistance program also helps individuals apply for and appeal FEMA decisions. So there's a number of ways that SBP can respond outside of just sending boots on the ground. With that said, what generally occurs is a monitoring of the event, a connection with the local community, and then a putting forward of recommendations on how SBP can be involved. Generally, when there is a major event, a Cat 3 or above along the Gulf, SBP will respond with individuals to offer muck, gut, and mold suppression. But as I shared, there are so many other ways that SBP seeks to really respond and help communities recover faster outside of just human beings deploying. So hopefully that answers that question. But my email address is also on the slide here. So if anybody would like to discuss this a little bit further, please feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thank you, Thomas. We have another question about how areas are chosen for new construction opportunities. Maybe you'd like to take that one. Perhaps Thomas again.
Sure, I'm happy
Great.
to. I'm tired of my voice. So Liz and I work together on introducing new housing to communities. And so there are scenarios where within our build program, when there's major destruction, like an EF5 tornado in Joplin, Missouri, where through our build program, the only option is to introduce new houses for those who owned a house pre-storm. But in tandem with that, our opportunity housing program introduces new homeownership opportunity for low-income home buyers. So understanding particular market conditions, subsidies, as well as community need for affordable housing is all part of kind of that initial assessment that Liz and Liz's team will do to understand if the conditions are ripe for opportunity housing. So today we're operating in New Orleans. We are operating in Houston, Texas with opportunity housing. And then we are, as I shared, introducing it into Puerto Rico. But as SBP continues to establish a base in communities where we have contractor presence and staff presence, we continue to try and understand the conditions that would be most beneficial for SBP to introduce the program.
Thank you, Thomas. We have another one about volunteer. Do you host groups to volunteers, or is it just individuals? I'd like to bring my church or school group. Liz, would you mind taking that one?
I was so excited I couldn't get off the mute button fast enough. I was stumbling there. Yes, we'd love to have you, please. As Alexis said, we're now in a position to work with volunteers in New Orleans, in Puerto Rico, and in Houston. And I think that Brianna dropped a link to the volunteer page, and we're also happy to follow up online, offline afterwards. But yeah, we would really appreciate your support. So thank you for asking.
Thank you, everyone. Any more questions? We will take them in the Q&A box. Okay, looks like we have another one about corporate and broader foundation philanthropy. Do you work with corporations and foundations? We absolutely do. If you are a part of or know of a foundation or corporation that is looking to get involved with this work, as I said at the beginning of the call, our work intersects a wide array of issue areas, and we're excited to be able to partner with both corporations and foundations. We do multi-year partnerships, as well as looking at all of the different interventions that we work with. So excited to do that and happy to connect with anyone offline on that. We'll take couple more minutes for questions and then release some time back into your schedules, because I'm sure you all have many things to do today. Let's see. Okay. We have one other question. Can a Habitat for Humanity become an SBP contractor, and what does that entail? From Harriet. Thank you, Harriet, for that question. Thomas or Liz?
Great question.
Zach?
Hey folks, Zach Rosenberg here. Harriet, I think anything is possible. When we use vendors, the goal is to get to scale and to get to speed. And any vendor that can meet the price goals, we would love to work with. We have supported habitats across the country, smaller habitats with financial support, and with AmeriCorps members. And so we're happy to explore offline. I do want to celebrate our Habitat partnership. When Liz and I were first starting out, we had more volunteers than we had tools and resources. And almost biblically, the local affiliate Habitat in New Orleans gave us 40 drills and 40 skill saws, kind of like an arc. And we use those tools to certainly need for clients, and we certainly had volunteers. We just didn't have the resource for tools. This is when we were itty bitty. And so we treasure relationships with Habitat, and, you know, again, are happy to consider anything.
Thank you so much for that. We'll maybe end with Greg's question, which is, how is your fellows program engaging in community organizing? And Reese, I'll go ahead and let you take that one, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Thank you.
Sure. So we're working with folks in Lake Charles on the HUD Choice Neighborhood project, which will bring as many as 560 units of new and affordable housing there. Our fellow in the area, Matthew Wheeler, has been bringing the plan around to area businesses and homeowners and community organizations in order to obtain critical citizen participation and feedback from the communities who will be most affected or stand to benefit or be impacted most by these projects. And we've really enjoyed so far the partnership and deepening our relationships with city and parish officials as they move this massive project through. We should have more certain detail about the funding that Lake Charles expects to receive in just the next couple of months. And so we'll be excited to give a deeper and fuller update later in the year.
Great, thank you so much. With that, Sylvia, we will contact you about the guidelines for the Fellows Program. We're excited about it, and I think it's a way for us to continue to maximize our impact in communities that are underserved. So with that, I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you. We can't do this work without you, and there is a palpable moment that we're in right now of people coming together like never before for this work and for the people in this country. And we greatly appreciate all of the time and resource that you bring to our community, and we're excited to work with you all. So again, please don't be strangers. We're excited to partner with you, new and existing partners, and look forward to being together soon. Have a wonderful day. And again, thank you so much for investing the time with us today. Take care.